Hello and welcome back to Lorehammer. I'm your host, Mork. Yeah, best intro yet. I'm your host, Mork. Perfect. That's like how I used to say my name when I was a small child. Hey, whatever. I'm Mark. Joining me, we got
I'm Mark.
I'm Mark. Can I please have some more, please?
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice,
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah, well, hey, welcome to Lorehammer. We got a whole schwack of people here. We got the one and only Christian.
Hey everyone. I don't have a one-liner for today, but you know.
I don't think we need them at this point in the episode. You know, one-liners, those are for professionals, and we are not that crew.
We need a better script writer.
Yeah. Whoever wrote this intro is doing an awful job. We got Jordan as well.
Hello.
Thanks for coming. Always
No problem,
excited to
bud.
hear your historical insight that you're going to share with us. I just can't wait to learn about some obscure fact about the Jews.
Hebrew history and culture, Mark.
That's
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes. And we also got a fourth chair today. Welcome, James, or AKA Gothic.
Hey
Garnish.
guys, thanks for
Welcome to
having
the show.
me. I'm new here, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, just for context, we did. I will have your episode of the bonus episode released by the time this is out.
Nice.
So people will kind of be familiar with you to some degree. But for those who haven't listened to that, yeah, we had a great conversation about just Gothic Garnish, your kind of side project. But maybe we'll get to that a little later on.
Cool.
Yeah, let's do some housekeeping real quick. Get moving along here. Everyone, welcome. The first thing we'll get to is Merlin Miniatures is sponsoring this episode, and it's super cool working with companies who sell the exact products that I'm shilling for. So I feel like that works hand in hand. James, what do they got?
Cool, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so Merlin's Miniatures is basically a online store that's based here in the UK. It covers everything from paints to miniatures to 140k to Warhammer. It provides worldwide shipping, so you can deliver your favorite miniatures and hobby supplies all around the world. They also list around 50 to 100 items added to the website each day, from classic Warhammer to the latest releases. There's always something kind of new there. Like if you're missing a specific Chaos arm from 1986, they probably have it in stock somewhere. And if you join the mailing list, you get 15% off. And if you're really feeling fruity, you can head to the link in the description to this show. If you click on that, you also get a 10% discount, and Mark gets some money out of it as well, which is nice. So yeah, head over to merlinsminiatures.co.uk and get your bits and pieces you need for your hobby.
Yeah, super excited working with them. Yeah, I keep eyeing all those old bits, man. There's Faramir and Rangers of Athelion down. Just like,
Sick.
God, if only I had $20 join the Patreon, please, somebody.
You know the money Mark makes, he's just gonna put it right back into the company. Just go back and buy.
Yeah, and then I get my little 10% kickback every mini I own. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, you're really not gonna make any money. You're just gonna accrue Warhammer.
Almost as bad as inflation. So we have a Discord. You can go join that. It's a lot of fun. There's a new channel going on there, the TTS Tabletop Simulator 40K channel. I think they're up to like 15 people or something like that are rocking games, and they're gonna start doing a tournament. So I've mentioned that a couple times, but we're getting closer, and I feel like it's about to go down. So go check out the Discord, check out all the fun different channels that are on there.
Yeah, and as always, help support the show via Patreon. You can join the Imperial Tithe. And you can get ad-free version of the show for only $2.50 a month, or video version for $5. So again, help Mark afford those Rangers of Athelion. That's this month's goal.
Please, it's only $20.
And if you are a member of the Patreon, you also get access to the live stream, and we have a lively chat going on even as I speak right now. You can jump on with us in the chat room. You can also be a call-in guest at the end of the show and join me for a little whiskey, which I don't have today. Sorry, guys. Nothing. Because
So we're gonna have to deal with sober Jordan.
Unfortunately, yeah. I am
He gets violent.
I'm at a resort right now, and it's like way too much money to pay for booze here. Not happening.
So join the Patreon and help Jordan buy some alcohol.
Yeah.
Help
Please.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, boys, we got a fun episode today. We got part 2 of Perturabo, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Horus Heresy and the Great Scouring. A lot of this episode is going to be about the Horus Heresy and what he does in it. he's got a lot of cool things on him. Maybe before I read the official recap, do you guys have like a 1-sentence teaser you kind of think about when you think about Perturabo in the Dead of Night?
I would say he gets memed on a lot by the community, and I don't know a lot about him personally, so I don't know if it's totally justified. Maybe it is. We'll find out. But
Yeah, I would say he's probably the Primarch I know the least about. But doing a little bit of reading, I'm intrigued. I want to know more. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think he. Yeah, I think he's the most sensitive of the Primarchs and the most like prideful and probably the most autistic as well. Probably.
the best of all qualities.
Yeah, you see,
Yeah, exactly.
you
Yeah,
see that one flung around a lot.
the perfect combination for a military leader.
Yeah, you know, some of those are fair insights about him, others not so much. My kind of 1-sentence teaser is siege warfare, man. You like dirty trenches, he's your guy. That's kind of what and artillery, man. What I liked about him in the last episode is just thinking about him and a bunch of his Iron Warriors just on the artillery line, just firing shell after shell that would pulp the insides of a normal human if they fired that many, but they just keep pounding them back. So last episode, we talked about his origins, the planet that he was from, and what he ended up doing in the Great Crusade. So I'll just do a little recap on that, but you should definitely go listen to that episode. Perturabo, the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, was cast upon the harsh, war-ravaged world of Olympia, a planet dominated by endless warfare and conflict. Its surface was scarred by centuries of strife, where city-states engaged in ceaseless battles over limited resources and territory. This brutal environment forged Perturabo into a master tactician, obsessed with the precision and order, his mind honed by constant need to strategize and adapt. Raised by the harshest of warriors, Perturabo learned the value of discipline and strength. Seeing the world through a lens of pragmatism and cold efficiency, the Olympian people, hardened by unrelenting war, became the foundation of the Iron Warriors, men and women who thrived under pressure. Now, I included that because they use a lot of conscripts, and, you know, I decided to give them some justice for once, all those female conscripts that the Iron Warriors use in the trench warfare to just throw bodies into the munition lines. So, yeah. Built to endure and triumph in the face of unyielded conflict, it was on the bleak and unforgiving world that Perturabo's destiny would take shape. His talented, nurtured by society that placed victory above all else, no matter the cost. When the Emperor discovered Perturabo on Olympia, he quickly realized the Primarch's potential, brought him into the fold of the Great Crusade. Perturabo, with his unparalleled strategic mind, was tasked with leading the Iron Warriors in the Emperor's campaign to unite the galaxy. His legion, the Fourth, was forged into an instrument of siege warfare, unmatched in their ability to tear down the defenses of enemy worlds. Throughout the Great Crusade, Perturabo led his warriors into countless battles. His expertise in fortifications and siege tactics, ensuring that no fortress was ever safe from the might of the Iron Warriors. However, Perturabo's relentless pursuit of perfection and his bitter resentment towards those who failed to understand his methods led to growing tensions within the Legion and his fellow Primarchs. Despite his successes, Perturabo's obsession with discipline and order often made him blind to the more subtle aspects of leadership, and his deep-seated bitterness would ultimately play a key in his fall to chaos. Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. I do like how the Primarchs always mimic their warfare from the planet they're from. Olympia is very much like Greek city-states. You get that vibe for sure. And then they're just waging war on.
That's a weird thing, actually, because Greek warfare isn't necessarily, like, it's not really siege warfare. So it's kind of funny that that's his style of combat. But you're right. Like, historically and aesthetically, they are very much Greek. The planet's called Olympia. And, like,
yeah, and like the cities are all in like city states that are organized like that.
And they constantly did war with each other too. That is how ancient Greece was. But it's weird that like warfare is what they chose as their instrument. And there's a couple of other weird things about specifically siege warfare, but I'll talk about those towards the end of the episode.
Olympia was also kind of an interesting planet too, because they also were like the Greeks who like philosophy and stuff. And a lot of Perturabo is that like cold, calculating intellect, a philosophical mind, like, and a quest for knowledge that goes even beyond what the Mechanicum kind of go for. Like, he wants to know how everything works. And sometimes it's so he can destroy it. Other times so it's so he can build it. But he needs to know how everything works.
Yeah, that's where the Tism jokes comes from.
Yeah. No joke for him.
One more quick thing too is that that bitterness that you talk about is often kind of that key attribute that people, dunk on him for. And I don't think it's totally unjustified. We'll get into it in the episode, but like his reasons for kind of getting bitter kind of makes sense.
I think at this point, we would have gotten into it. Like, he's been positioned on planet after planet of just shit trench warfare.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, while his brothers claim glory and get honor, he's the one that's like sucking mud day after day. So you could see how that could jade even a demi.
But I think also he's like I mentioned this when we had the intros, but he's very, very sensitive, and there's and there's a really interesting interaction he has with another Primarch where we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there's an interaction that we talk about and how the other Primarch just kind of like smirks at him when he sort of opens up slightly about how he feels, and then he kind of goes back into himself and then gets angry again. It's like it's classic kind of like
That's so sad for that
fear and tension, and he's just so like he's built up all this tension. He's scared, but he's actually like angry at everyone. He wants to kind of take it out, and he's extremely sensitive. He wants to go out there and just pound walls, but we're going to do it later.
He's like that teenager that punches holes in the drywall.
Yeah. Like
he's got like school shooter vibes.
for sure, definitely. I view him as like a kind of like the angry metal kid at school who kind of who's really angry all the time. And that's kind of the way I see him.
Yeah, for sure. I love it.
Okay, let's roll into the Great Crusade. So, mastery of siege warfare. The Iron Warriors excelled at siege operations. Their ability to breach even the most fortified worlds and defenses became legendary. Under Perturabo's leadership, they became the Emperor's preferred legion for breaking through enemy strongholds, utilizing a combination of overwhelming firepower and meticulous planning. The legion was defined by its unyielding discipline, with Perturabo insisting on absolute precision and order in every aspect of warfare. The Iron Warriors were meticulously trained, each warrior a cog in a vast machine of war, capable of executing complex strategies with terrifying efficiency. Yeah, so they were like highly disciplined, like willing to sacrifice themselves in the grind of siege warfare. But James, you have a point there too?
Yeah. So one of his favorite methods for like sort of flexing his authority amongst his own legion was the method of decimation. So he uses that a lot through the course of the year. So which basically is the case where he picks 1 out of 10 Marines out of his own like legion, and they're all being to death by their friends, by their brothers, and he does this repeatedly over the course of the years. And in fact, when he first gets reunited his legion, the first thing he does, he analyzes every single thing. He analyzes their past performances, their losses, their wins, what happens, and he sits there for days and days and days analyzing every reel of data, everything he can find, every image, everything, and he comes out of it and he goes like, well, you guys aren't that great. So the first thing he did was decimation. So like Dad's home, he walks into the house, goes to his office, sits in there for a week, comes out, and then you have to kill your brother.
I have to kill 1 in 10 of all your kids.
It's like, that's the first thing he did. Like, hey, Dad,
grabs that executive pen.
like that's the first thing he did, and that's the sort of guy he is. He's just like he's a nutcase. He's literally a nutcase. But this is the way it works. He's just like he's clinical, and he's just like that's not right. This is how he fixes it. Fear.
Yeah, and that speaks to his like cold leadership style, right? Like he doesn't care about how you feel about it. You guys failed, you guys get punished. That's it. It's a very like matter of fact. Kind of like decimation in real life was a real thing that the Roman legions did, which is pretty horrific too. Like literally you beat to death your comrades. But typically they reserve that kind of punishment if I think cowardice was the main thing. They like you never want to retreat in the battle. They'd rather you die on the battlefield than you retreat. So they were extra vicious around cowardice. So it's not like something they did just for any minor mistake. But Perturabo seems to have like taken that to a different level of like, don't screw up.
You mispronounce his name in a meeting, and all of a sudden, decimation.
He just throws like clubs in the middle of the meeting room table, and you know what to do. Let's get into his strained relations with his fellow Primarchs. Despite their effectiveness in combat, the Iron Warriors were often at odds with other legions, particularly the more charismatic or idealistic Primarchs. Perturabo's cold, calculating nature and his growing discontent with the Emperor's refusal to grant him the recognition he believed he deserved created a rift between him and his brother, setting the stage for his eventual defection. Yeah. So again, just speaking to his, broken relationships all around, like broken with his brothers, broken with his own legion. We're not off to a great start.
Oh, I was
Sorry,
saying, I think like in any good story, you kind of have to have that like black sheep in the family, if you will, the one that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the group.
The one
And
that should have been
yeah, kind
decimated at birth.
Yeah, like we've only done a couple Primarchs, but his upbringing was very similar to Lion's, where he was alone for a long time and therefore is kind of turned internally. Where a lot of the other Primarchs were kind of discovered right away, put into a mining camp or put into a family home or whatever. But yeah, definitely that isolation kind of loner mentality, where even among his brothers, he does not fit in and even gets into some scraps. And then he even has a brother that it's a rivalry, and it's pretty open too. Like, if they were ever pitted against each other, they'd just both be slavitating at it.
Slavity.
Salivating,
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, that would be it.
That would
But
be
with
it.
acid spit, so it's extra spicy.
All right, shall we get into the Horus Heresies? As the heresy loomed, Perturabo found himself suffocating under the crushing weight of expectation and neglect. His simmering resentment forged into a weapon of unrelenting bitterness. There are also those who claim it was Horus himself who orchestrated this slow unraveling, manipulating campaigns, reassigning deployments, ensuring Perturabo and his Iron Warriors bore the brunt of the Imperium's most thankless wars. For the Fourth Legion, the heresy was not a sudden betrayal, but the inevitable culmination of years of hardship, treachery, and degradation during the latter days of the Great Crusade. These compound misfortunes corroded the Legion's spirit, distorting its warriors into something both monstrous and broken. Central to his spiral into darkness was the rebellion on Olympia, the homeworld of Perturabo, and heart of the Legion's domain within the Meritara cluster. The death of the tyrant of Locos, Olympia's ruler, and had not brought stability, but instead unleashed a torrent of political venom. The once duplicitous power struggles devolved into open insurrection, fueled by the festering resentment of a population ravaged by the Imperium's demands. Generation after generation of Olympia's youth had been tithed to the Legion, never to return, leaving behind a bitter populace who saw no reward for their sacrifice.
One achievement that the Iron Warriors unlocked during the Great Crusade was most amount of casualties taken. So, ta-ding, will pop up for Perturabo. He's got one trophy.
And how many of those were his fault?
Yeah, where he just whatever.
Like when you decimate yourselves every time, like you count those as kills too.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, you count him as deaths, but you don't count him as kills. So you add it to the casualty rate,
that's
but
how
you're
you
not
do it.
getting the glory for it.
All right. The timing of this uprising was a cruel stroke. For over a year, the Iron Warriors had been mired in the grueling eradication of the Hrud, a xenoform infestation whose mere presence sapped both life and sanity from those who dared oppose it. The campaign had drained the Legion to its core, leaving them hollowed and raw. To be called back from that nightmare to face rebellion on their own soil was a final insult, a wound too deep to ignore. Perturabo responded with cold, methodical fury. The Fourth Legion descended upon Olympia not as liberators, but as executioners. City by city, fortress by fortress, they dismantled the very defenses Perturabo had once engineered, crushing all resistance beneath their relentless march. No mercy was shown. None were spared. By the time the purge was complete, 5 million Olympians lay dead, their blood soaking the soil of their world. The survivors were shackled, condemned to brutal servitude under the iron grip of the very legion they had once supported. Perturabo stood amidst the smoldering ruins of his birthplace, his gaze as cold and unyielding as the fortresses he had razed. It was only as the funeral pyres roared, cleansing the landscape of the mountains of corpses, that the enormity of his actions began to pierce his hardened soul.
One thing we talked about on the last episode is how Perturabo was like, he was the master of everything. You know, as most Primarchs are, everything they touch it turns to gold. And how that created two things. It created that aspect of pride in him where he's like, I'm literally better than everyone on the planet at everything. Yeah, okay, that can go to your head for sure. But it also kind of created this little bit of oh man, I'm trying to think of the right word that we used on the last episode. It was perfect, but it created also, like I said, the pride. But one other thing, you know what? I forgot what it is, but pride's a big thing that's created in him. Yeah.
But it's the thing.
Oh yeah, okay. So the other thing was it also created like now he goes back to his planet and he sees that they're still kind of fucking up. And he always hated his planet. He never liked it there. He thought he was superior to it. And then he goes back and it's messed up there. So he goes down hard with the hammer on them. He's got like no time for seriousness or unserious behavior.
But to see, I think that action of his is really uncharacterful. Like of him, it's not his usual character. Like to destroy that entire, to go down there and wipe out 5 million of the population. That isn't this decision of his to go down to the planet and massacre 5 million people. That's not a intelligent decision that is usual of his character. That's a emotional, irrational decision. So once again, it shows that he's like, you've hurt his feelings, and he's up in the orbit and he sees his old planet going mental and doing the things he told them not to do, and he's like, right, that's it. I'm annoyed now. I'm going to go down and wipe you all out. Like he's like throwing his toys out the pram, and he's showing his like human side once again. Of his emotions. He's not, do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's irrational. It doesn't make sense to do that, but he does it anyway because he gets upset.
Yeah, it's like he can tolerate so much, but then he eventually hits that breaking point where then he snaps and shows his emotions.
But that's exactly it. I think that speaks to that those emotions are always there under the surface, and he's like, he puts up a tougher exterior to hide, like you were saying, James, there. Like, it's a good read on him being like very emotional, like he at his core. And so he creates that iron exterior to like protect that emotional core. Man, we're getting really like
psychological,
touchy-feely about it. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. And like you're saying, eventually like that facade gives way and his true emotional responses come out, not that mechanical, rational side.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money.
All right. The Iron Warriors were no longer defenders of the Imperium. Their hands, once tasked with dismantling Xenos threats like the Flood, were now stained with the blood of their own kin. As the fires of Olympia's mass graves cooled, a grim realization settled over Perturabo. There would be no redemption for what he had done. His father, the Emperor, would see only an unforgivable atrocity, a sin too vast to be absolved. But Horus, ever the serpent, offered a different solace. The Warmaster did not merely forgive Perturabo's genocide, he celebrated it, praising his brother's ruthless efficiency and unwavering dedication. Horus swore that Perturabo should feel no guilt for Olympia's annihilation, but such promises are easy to make and impossible to uphold. The weight of those ashes would never leave him.
Yeah, he just congratulates him on being really thorough.
Genocide your own people.
Wow, little brother, you really did good.
Hey, at least you got them all. I'm having like really
Horus is just a glass half full.
Standing in the ruins, piles of skulls on fire. Mark, if I'm not mistaken, the destruction of Olympia is also before like the open declaration of heresy, right? Like Horus is already corrupted, but the wider galaxy doesn't know it yet. So Perturabo's like not even in league with Chaos while he's doing these like atrocities.
Yeah, and like
that's my understanding.
And he hasn't been affected like Fulgrim by some weapon over the past couple years. He's not being affected by Chaos in the same way. We did mention a little bit that like he's kind of haunted maybe a little bit at one moment in his time by like some type of like warp cloud thing. Like when he closed his eyes, he would see it, but I don't know if that was always there, just a one-time thing.
He could see like the Eye of Terror.
He's aligned with Horus obviously and fighting the Imperium, but by this point he hasn't been given over to Chaos like the other Primarchs, has he?
No.
Or am I missing something here?
No, not yet. And even truly, like of all the Chaos Legions, and we'll probably get into it towards the end of the episode, he is the least Chaos aligned, if you want to put it that
Or
way.
the most resistant to chaos, perhaps you could say.
Yeah, like he's a different breed.
Mm.
Him and Primarch, I won't say that Mark is very sensitive about, are both kind of outliers on the chaos side of things, but we'll delve into that towards the end here.
There's a cool quote from Perturabo where he says, "I worship nothing, I believe in nothing," and that kind of really helps him with that chaos. It's almost like the Emperor's original plan there of, if we just don't tell them, maybe they just won't, they'll be immune to it. But fun quote.
He's the edgy atheist kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Him and Angron, I think, were both like broken before Chaos Taint. Like they were already probably going to go down a path, if Chaos wasn't even in the picture, that probably would lead them into some kind of rebellion or conflict with the Imperium, regardless. The other quick thing I wanted to mention, lots of strong Greek tragedy vibes, which obviously is the theme with Perturabo, who's also another major Greek character in modern kind of mythos, is Kratos from God of War, who, when you're talking about like the ashes of Olympia, like Kratos is marked with the ashes of his family, very much in the same vein. Like their traits are what caused the tragedy to happen, and that's like the Greek tragedy, which again, all the Greek themes. So.
There it is, found it.
Yeah.
It's cool. So let's continue the Horus Heresy. So it was during this turbulent period that ominous reports of the Horus Heresy's eruption on Istvan III reached Olympia, followed swiftly by terse, uncompromising orders from Terra. The Imperium was beginning to fracture, its fragile unity corroded by betrayal and deceit. Limerus and his savage space wolves had assaulted Prospero, the homeworld of Magnus the Red and the Thousand Suns, acting under the Emperor's directive but manipulated by Horus's treachery. Meanwhile, Horus himself, with his 15th Legion, the Sons of Horus, had openly declared his rebellion. Joined by the Death Guard, Emperor's children, and the World Eaters, the galaxy teetered on the precipice of all-out civil war. The Emperor's new command summoned the Iron Warriors to Istvan V, where they were to unite with 6 other loyalist legions to confront Horus and his traitor forces. But the battle that followed would become a grotesque theatre of betrayal. The Iron Warriors, alongside the Night Lords, Word Bearers, the Alpha Legion, turned their weapons not against Horus, but upon their unsuspecting brothers. The Loyalist legions, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, the Raven Guard, were nearly annihilated in what would be remembered as the infamous Drop Site Massacre. Yet the truth was far more calculated. Perturabo, like his fellow traitor Primarchs, had already pledged his allegiance to the Warmaster long before setting foot on Istvan V. Their treachery was not a spontaneous betrayal, but a meticulously orchestrated coup, ensuring that 9 legions would stand against the Emperor's dwindling loyalists. In the aftermath of this blood-soaked triumph, Horus sought to reward Perturabo for his loyalty and ruthlessness. The prize was Forgebreaker, a power hammer of grim significance. It had once belonged to Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, whose life had been violently extinguished by Fulgrim during the massacre. The weapon, wrenched from the corpse of a fallen brother, was more than a trophy. It was a symbol of Perturabo's break from the Emperor and his embrace of Horus's cause. The gift, however, was misunderstood by many. Fools whispered that Forgebreaker was the instrument that sealed the pact between Perturabo and the Warmaster, but Perturabo, cool and unflinching, knew the truth. It was not the weapon, but something far more insidious. Horus's forgiveness. The Emperor would never absolve Perturabo for Olympia, for the blood of his own people that stained his hands. But Horus? Horus had embraced him, celebrated his ruthlessness. It was that acceptance, that acknowledgement of Perturabo's unrelenting bitterness and strategic brilliance that truly bound the Iron Warriors to Horus.
Yeah, like one of the big complaints of Perturabo during the Great Crusade was he just was not getting that acknowledgement. He was getting all these shit jobs and he wasn't even getting any acknowledgement for it. And then, you got Horus, who's like this super charismatic, manipulative leader kind of guy who sees this. He's like, I can take advantage of that. I'm going to use that little niche in the armor there.
And what I think is interesting is like, he knows that what he did to Olympia, to his home planet, wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a nice thing to do, and he knew that. And then Horus he was feeling guilty about it, and Horus came along and was like,
We've all genocided. It's fine.
it's all good.
Jordan's done it.
We've all done it before.
Christian's done it.
I mean, Angron's going to do it. Lime's going to do it. Yeah, it's like, yeah. So it's like, don't worry about it. He's like, really? He's like, yeah, don't worry about it, mate. Honestly, Sieves, don't worry about it. And then he goes like, oh, that's cool, because like, Dad won't be annoyed at me now, so my brother's with me. And like that kind of gave him the perfect out to lead into chaos, and Horus like shows once again how like intelligent Horus is, and how like he's 10 steps ahead of everything, isn't he? And he knows exactly what's going on, and he's already led down the path that he's planned years ahead. It's amazing.
There's also this thing about like in Horus's character that you kind of see in the novelizations, where he never corrects or punishes or confronts like, or very, very rarely, any of his subordinates. Like, he gets other people to do that. So it would almost be out of character if Horus were to, for some reason, rebuke Perturabo for whatever reason. So it is like in character for Horus to do that, and also to use it as a manipulation tactic to get him so that he can control him more. Especially if Horus, and I don't know, like, does Horus, he probably knows at this point that like Perturabo hasn't been infested with chaos yet. So like he's got to control him, right? And make sure he doesn't turn on them
it's one thing to like betray the Imperium and be like, the Emperor's doing a bad job. It's another thing to then sell your soul to like the realms of chaos. There's another step there.
Yeah.
But also like it wasn't the path to chaos straight away. Like it wasn't like, oh, by the way, do you want to join chaos? It was a very like slow path to there. It was like it was over years and years. Initially, all it was we don't like the Emperor, like let's not follow him, let's do our own thing. And that's how it started. It wasn't like let's join chaos, it was a very slow path, and before they know it, you're turning into a demon.
Next thing you know, you're growing horns.
Next thing you know, you're a demon. Exactly. I hate when that happens.
And just to add to the conversation, Skeleton in the comments says, when you do something bad, the hard path is for absolution, but the easier path is to excuse and exalt the behavior after being shunned before Olympia. It makes sense what path he took.
So now
I think that's true.
Jump to Hydra Caudatus. As Horus Rebellion dragged into the relentless march, the Iron Warriors seized the opportunity to exact calculated vengeance on the long-standing rivals, the Imperial Fists. Their chosen battleground was Hydra Caudatus, a recently compliant world claimed by the Sons of Dorn. The Iron Warriors descended like executioners, following a brutal saturation bombardment that turned the fertile valleys and agri settlements surrounding the Camdian citadel into charred wastelands. Rivers were vaporized by magna bombs. Mass drivers scoured the earth into lifeless dust, and the once thriving planet was reduced to ash. Yet, the Cadmean citadel itself remained untouched. This was no oversight. It was deliberate, methodical insult. The garrison of the Imperial Fists left behind by Rogal Dorn could scarcely fathom such precision. But that was the Iron Warriors' intent, to demonstrate their absolute superiority, to show that they were Dorn-built, to show where Dorn-built Perturabo could easily destroy at will. For nearly 3 months, the Citadel's ancient fortifications, blending the ingenuity of long-dead architects with the natural defenses, held back the Iron Warrior siege. The courage of the Imperial Fists and their mortal allies within the fortress stalled Perturabo's advancement, preventing his forces from redeploying to other fronts in the war. But the Iron Warriors were nothing if not relentless. Every day, the defenders clung to life only to delay the inevitable. Yeah, like this is like the immovable rock versus the unbreakable object or whatever that is. What is that saying? Yeah, except, this force has unlimited manpower behind it.
When an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
Yeah.
That is
there we go. This is why Jordan's so much wiser than the rest of us, because he just studies those Chinese proverbs.
There's no correct
day in and day out. But yeah, like Perturabo, though, once you kind of meet him in Siege, there's no stopping him. He's going to throw all the bodies he has at you, and he's going to throw not just Space Marines, he's going to throw cultists, he's going to throw whatever he has. When the Citadel's walls finally cracked and the Iron Warriors' merciless assault, The reprieve ended in carnage. Perturabo himself led the final charge, his fury cold and calculating. In mere minutes, over 30 Imperial Fist Astartes were butchered by his hand. The remaining defenders, 52 Space Marines and 13,000 civilians who had sought refuge, stood no chance. The slaughter was total. Men, women, and children were massacred without hesitation. The surviving mortals were not spared, but they were shackled and enslaved, their lives repurposed as tools for the Iron Warriors' next campaign. Hydra Cordatus, once a fertile jewel of the Imperium crown, was left a desolate wasteland, a barren monument to Perturabo's bitterness and the Iron Warriors' ruthless efficiency. This was not just a victory, it was a statement. No fortress could withstand the Iron Warriors. No enemy would be spared their wrath. Cool. I like that they took all those people. I wonder how many of them then got turned into Iron Warriors himself. Now without a homeworld, now they got to start doing recruitment processes like that.
Yeah, or how many just end up, being munition slaves and more meat for the grinders too.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would have to start recruiting from pretty much slaves at this point.
Yeah, that's a crazy battle. Those defenders did a good job, but ultimately there's nothing you could do against it. The other thing to mention about Perturabo in the Great Crusade, I think he had a record of being undefeated. I think the only time he lost is when he himself decimated his units. Where even there have been in a different way. He doesn't have like the most amount of victories. They're not the quickest. They're not pretty victories, but they always victories.
Yeah, that would be a cool contrast of he has maybe the highest body counts, but he gets the job done. So that speaks for itself. Well, a little kind of overlap with our Fulgrim episode. Yeah. Let's talk about the Angel Exterminatus. After the ruthless subjugation of Hydra Cordatus, Perturabo, ever the pragmatist, received word that Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, sought an audience. The Phoenician's message was laced with his typical theatrical flair, promising something wondrous. Perturabo, immune to such flowery language, viewed the overture with suspicion. Fulgrim's penchant for melodrama had only deepened since his legion pledged itself to Horus. Whatever his meeting entailed, Perturabo anticipated more posturing than substance. Perturabo harbored no illusions of brotherhood with his fellow Primarchs. Their kinship was a hollow formality. Yet once Fulgrim's obsession with perfection had mirrored Perturabo's own ruthless pursuit of precision and mastery. For the Emperor's Children, perfection was an artful performance. For the Iron Warriors, it was forged through discipline, attrition, and calculated destruction. Different methods, perhaps, but they had once shared a common destination. Those days were long past. Perturabo suspected Fulgrim's visit had a strategic purpose tied to Mars. The Warmaster's plans hinged on securing the Red Planet, and Fulgrim likely sought the Iron Warriors' expertise to breach the Mechanicum's forged cities. If this assumption was correct, Perturabo intended to ensure his legion was ready to execute the assault with brutal efficiency. But until concrete orders arrived, he would tolerate his brother's pretense of camaraderie and listen, even if every word grated against his patience. As Perturabo meticulously crafted his next campaign, news arrived that the Emperor's Children had landed, without invitation, on Hydra Cordatus. Over 300 drop craft descended beyond the valley's mouth, disrupting the Iron Warriors' occupation with their unannounced arrival. Perturabo's contempt simmered beneath his cold exterior. Fulgrim's arrogance knew no bounds. Nevertheless, the Lord of Iron would not let his disdain disrupt his Iron Warriors' ironclad discipline. Oh man, I always screw up these numbers. Is that the fourth? The 4th Legion assembled with ruthless precision to receive the 3rd Legion. Tens of thousands of Thoracatai Imperial Army troops stood in rigid ranks, a sea of unwavering obedience. Before them, 50,000 Iron Warriors formed 200 grand battalions, their warplate burnished in amber dust, reflecting the bleak sun like a tide of molten metal. It was a display of power, not for celebration, but for domination, a grim reminder of the slaughter that had painted the black sands of Isfahan V with loyalist blood. Perturabo did not assemble his force to honor Fulgrim, he assembled it to remind him.
Yeah, they've had it in a couple times already at this point. So yeah, he's really not happy with Fulgrim, just his arrogance. He's almost like the exact opposite of Fulgrim, where Fulgrim's super charismatic, almost gaudy, likes interacting with people, engaging, where Perturabo doesn't want to engage in like what we almost would think is like human spirit, where it's like hanging out with people, going to parties or stuff like that,
Yeah, it's cool because like like in that paragraph, they're mirrored in the same destination of like Perturabo is obsessed with his own version of perfection. It's just how they get to that perfection is totally opposite. And they have totally opposite like outcomes. Like even the aesthetics of the Iron Warriors are very much like not decorated, not like overly painted, like very industrial. And Fulgrim's are obviously very like I don't know, baroque and like
Gaudy,
lack of a better word. So they're interesting pair to contrast for sure.
Side note, that's like
Or in
such a cool image, isn't it? Of all
Instagram
those,
short,
like,
someone had the power to make
Iron Warriors standing there, though. Imagine seeing that in a movie.
make some kind of visual representation of that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Not art.
All right, so let's continue on the Angel Exterminatus. Perturabo and his senior officers observed with cold, calculating disdain the garish spectacle that poured from the 3rd Legion's drop site into the alley. What emerged was a grotesque parody of warriors, a cavalcade of noise, color, and excess. The Emperor's children were unrecognizable, twisted reflections of the once honorable legion that had stood beside the Iron Warriors in countless campaigns. Perturabo's keen eye registered every unnatural disfigurement, every sickening degradation etched into their flesh and armor. These mutations served no tactical purpose, no logical function. They were distractions, weaknesses, masquerading as evolution. He could not fathom what disease had rooted itself within his brother's legion, but he despised its presence. Fulgrim, in his newfound decadence, sought a private audience with Perturabo within the fortified austerity of the Lord of Iron's commander bunker. The contrast between the bare, efficient space and Fulgrim's flamboyant intrusion was stark. Yet the Phoenician did not come empty-handed. His offer was intoxicating, an opportunity for Perturabo to realize every ambition, to see his meticulous designs brought to flawless fruition, never to falter, never to be overshadowed. Fulgrim proposed an alliance, a merging of their forces, in a grand campaign that could decisively tilt the scales of the Warmaster's rebellion. Perturabo, ever the skeptic, weighed his brother's words with measured suspicion. Fulgrim's intentions were layered in deceit, that much was clear. But perhaps through shared battle the truth would surface. Common cause had revealed much in the past. Why not now? When Fulgrim unveiled his true purpose, they were to journey into the heart of the warp storm, one that had haunted Perturabo's dreams since childhood, an ever-present shadow gnawing at the edges of his mind. Buried within the maelstrom was the Angel Exterminatus, an ancient Xenos weapon of unspeakable power, so potent that this relic that the very so potent was this relic that the very stars had turned against it, sealing it within its grave to prevent its release. A weapon of such magnitude could reshape the galaxy, or annihilate it, and Perturabo's resentful of the burdens placed upon him, of the scorn of his brothers, and the thankless toil of his siege and slaughter, felt a flicker of something dangerous, not hope, but something colder, a tool for vengeance.
Totally.
Like I said,
Completely, man. Completely. Like again, he's like so emotional. Again.
And when you're a Primarch, this would be the equivalent of the gun that you use, right? So
he loves a good mystery too. Like
that's
he's like, man, what knowledge, what weapon could this be? Like, I need to open up this weapon, crack it open, look inside. Perturabo was a master builder too, and that was another thing that like Fulgrim and him could almost relate to, so close but not quite, where they were both like artists, but in a different way. Where Perturabo was like a builder, and not just of cities and architecture and fortification. He built like a miniature Warhound Titan that was fully functional, that could shoot guns and everything. So it like that level of like craftsmanship is like and is almost a art in and of itself, you know. So it's almost another thing where he kind of relates with Fulgrim. He's like, okay, we'll kind of go on this. We're almost similar, but we're not.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting that you're hearing more and more that he's not driven by a combined purpose with the other Primarchs or with the Chaos.
Yeah.
Like he's driven by a very human emotion, which is vengeance and just wanting just to show everyone he's big and he knows what he's doing. It's quite interesting,
Yeah.
and you see that more and more in his notes. But let's jump into the Eye of Terror. So, for as long as Perturabo could remember, the Eye of Terror had been a constant, inescapable presence, a malignant shadow gnawing at the edges of his perception. No distance, no matter how vast, could sever the connection. Whether he stood on the distant fringes of the galaxy or within the heart of Imperial space, the echo of that warp storm was always there, lurking just beyond sight. On every world where he had gazed skyward, its unseen pull tugged at his mind. He did not know if this unnatural awareness had been deliberately woven into his genetic design, like the wings of Sanguinius or the predatory eyes of Corax, or if it was some cruel defect in the code. This is quite interesting. I think this potentially is where Chaos might have seeded this from back in the day when that deal was made with the Emperor. This is quite interesting. I think like all the Primarchs were built in with a slight factory reset button, and like with the ability to, there's a slight chink in their armor that the gods have put in there slightly, and I think this is his. That draw to the warp was always there from birth, and I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
There was there's much as part of him as the iron in his blood, a curse masquerading as insight. The anomaly haunted his dreams, poisoning even his most private moments with its oppressive presence. It threaded his nightmares, seeded into his thoughts, and tainted every calculation, every design with its malign influence. When he had once in a rare, so this is what I was talking about when he talks to one of the Primarchs and he just kind of shrugs him off. Every time with its malign influence, when he had once in a rare moment of vulnerability asked Ferris Manus if his silver eyes granted him similar visions, the Iron Hands Primarch had simply sneered, his expression tinged with contempt, as though Perturabo had confessed some petty weakness. After that, Perturabo never spoke of it again, burying his resentment alongside all the other grudges he harbored against his brothers. Like that tells you everything you need to know about what kind of guy he is. Like he tried opening up to his brothers, like, and hit them, and they just basically laughed at him. That just that defines his.
Shut up, nerd.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like for that one moment he showed weakness. He put himself out there, and his brother just went, "Shut up," And it's like, and that just shapes his psychology towards his brothers, and he takes it out on everyone and everything, including his own planet. But now, standing on the precipice of that maelstrom, with the combined fleets of the Third and Fourth Legions at his back, Perturabo saw it not as a distant spectre, but in a raw, unfiltered reality. For once, others could see it too. Though their perception was shallow, ignorant of the true depths of its horror, they acknowledged its existence. But only Perturabo grasped the full magnitude of its corruption. His eyes pierced beyond the storm-seething veil, into the fractured world swallowed within. He saw planets twisted into grotesque parodies of reality, where the laws of physics crumbled like brittle glass, and Euclidean geometry became a sick joke. These were realms where reason had been discarded, where lunatic forces reigned, and mortal comprehension was but a fleeting illusion. And now he was to plunge into that abyss, guarded by the cryptic whispers of an alien seer. An alliance born of necessity, not trust. Before breaching the warp rift, Perturabo summoned the astrogation charts, their flickering holographic projections casting cold light across his command deck. He scanned the feeble designations scribbled onto the map, the pitiful attempts of nameless cartographers to impose order on a region that defied all logic. At the storm's heart, a stark black label cleaved through the fiery orange swirl of the warp anomaly. The name imposed upon it, Cygnus X1. Perturbado's lips curled into a bitter sneer. Cygnus X1, a name recycled from some long-forgotten anomaly, slapped onto this horror by a scribe too ignorant to understand the gravity of what they had labelled. Such a monstrous presence deserved more than a sterile designation. It required a name that would that would bleed fear into the hearts of all who heard it, a name that would reverberate through the millennia until the galaxy itself was dust and only the storm remained, a malign scar across the universe. Sorry. With a flick of his fingers, Perturabo altered the designation. Across the traitor fleets, the new name spread, embedding itself into new data engine and astrogation chart. The Imperium itself would eventually adopt it, unwittingly honouring the foresight of the Lord of Iron. The storm would no longer be a mere anomaly. It would be the Eye of Terror. That's so cool, isn't it? That he kind of they came up with that name. That's so sick. And I'm really surprised like no one called it the Eye of Terror before that, because it looks like an eye and it's terrifying.
Yeah,
But I love that he was kind of the guy. It was one of those things that no one ever mentioned, but it was one
Well,
of those things.
I always thought it kind of looked beautiful though. Like you see some pictures of the swirling purple, and like if you don't know that there's demons on the other side waiting to devour your soul, it almost has this like Northern Lights kind of vibe to it, you know?
Mark would fall to chaos confirmed.
Yes.
He just gets sucked right in.
He's drawn to it. He's drawn to
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I didn't know until this episode that Perturabo called it the Eye of Terror, because I always thought it was like that, like name that 10,000 years into the future, you know, oh, the bad guys live in there, it's Eye of Terror. But man, it was really more Perturabo. He's been getting visions of terror and fear from this since he was a child, and it's interesting that it's like his terror too.
It's very personal.
Yeah, very personal to
Yeah.
him.
And then it's
Not just like
and what's interesting is like so. Oh, sorry. So I was going to say that I think it's quite interesting, like the connection to our world as well, our kind of reality. So like Cygnus X9 is a black hole that's a few light years away from here, that was discovered in 1964. So that's what they're discussing about an ancient anomaly, which is quite cool. So that actually exists, Cygnus X1.
cool.
If that's the Eye of Terror, that's terrifying, but it's quite far away. And then also in the book Farseer by William King, it's quite cool. All the navigators and stuff, they put like a note on the area before it was called the Eye of Terror, and it just had like abandon hope all ye who enter here, which is obviously a quote from Dante's Inferno, which also ties back to hell as well, which is so it's quite interesting how these like human connections that draw it back, and all the rings of hell, and obviously that I mean the Eye of Terror is hell, so it's quite interesting.
That's a cool thought to kind of jump back to like the start of the Great Crusade, where you know they're just starting to label some of these anomalies and they don't quite know what they are. So yeah, they label this one like abandon all hope, like don't go in here. Like they don't have this cool fancy title yet. They don't know what chaos fully is yet. And they're just going and exploring. And yeah, very cool thought. We just know if you interact with that star anomaly, nothing's come out of it yet.
It's not good news, that's for sure.
We'll go now to the Scythotheum. Scythotheum. How would you guys say this one? Scythotheum. Yeah, okay. Unbeknownst to both the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children, their advance was shadowed by a grim, relentless force. A ragged band of loyalist Astartes, survivors of the Istavan V drop site massacre. They were not mere soldiers. They were not the sacred, or they were the scarred remnants of the legions betrayed, driven by a singular consuming purpose. To bring ruin to the traitors. No matter the cost, drawn from the blood-soaked hell of the Urgal depression, these warriors had clawed their way out of the killing fields, their survival less a victory and more a defiance born of spite. Their escape from Istavan's system was no less brutal than the massacre itself. Aboard the Scythotheum, an Iron Hand strike crew that commandeered an Iron Hand strike cruiser commandeered in chaos, they tore through the traitors' orbital blockade with cold, calculated desperation. The Scythotheum's crew was a patchwork of Iron Hands Astartes and their mortal serfs, but scattered among them were the embers of other broken legions, survivors of the Salamanders and a lone shadow-cloaked Raven Guard. Their flight to the Gravipause, the precarious boundary where the sun's grip loosened just enough to allow a warp jump, was a gauntlet of nerve-shredding engagements and silent, haunted runs. The Scythotheum broke free, but without leaving pieces of itself or crew behind. that's pretty cool. That little gravity pulse. That's another one of those Mandeville points that we talked about, where you can jump into certain parts in the system, and if you jump any closer, any farther, you're fucked with like planet's gravity and all that. You could really wreck a bunch of stuff. In the months that followed, the Sisypheum became a phantom of vengeance, prowling the northern fringes of the galaxy. It was a predator, surgically striking at traitor forces, threading their way through the segmentum obscurus. Supply hulks bloated with ammunition and mortal troops, slow-moving cartographer ships, and unwary scout craft all became prey to the Sisypheum's merciless hit-and-run assaults. Their goal was not grand victories or decisive battles, but to bleed the enemy dry, to turn every flanking maneuver into a death march, every supply line into a noose. Disruption and harassments were their weapons, sharpened by the bitter knowledge that their legion, the Iron Tenth, was shattered beyond repair. Without the strength to wage traditional warfare, the survivors forged a new doctrine. They would be the thorns in the traitors' flanks, a constant irritation that diverted attention from greater threats. Their existence was a spiteful refusal to fade into obscurity. At Kavar Sarta, the Sisypheum's campaign took a decisive turn. Skabak Wayland, an iron hand hardened by loss, and Nikona Sherokin, the last Raven Guard aboard, captured the unilingual cipher host, one of the so-called cryptos. This hybrid monstrosity of the Dark Mechanicum had rendered the traitors' communication an impenetrable enigma, but with its capture, the Loyalists tore down the walls of secrecy. For the first time since Istvan, they could see into the heart of the enemy's plans. Armed with this knowledge, Captain Yorick Branathan of the Iron Hands steered the Sisypheum on a new course. The fractured communications revealed convergence of the traitor Primarchs at Hydra Cordatus, a meeting steeped in dark intent. Barthen's strategy crystallized into a single unyielding directive: follow, intercept, and sabotage. When they learned of Fulgrim's twisted ambition to breach the Eye of Terror and claim the Angel Exterminatus, an ancient and malevolent Xenos weapon, the Sisypheum course was set. Their journey into the warp was guided by a mysterious Asinari seer. Asinari. A Suriani seer, a fragile alliance of necessity, born not of trust, but of mutual enmity for traitors. The Sisypheum moved with calculated precision, a blade honed by resentment, poised to strike at the heart of the enemy's design. They were not savers, they were vengeance incarnate, and they would see the traitors bleed or be broken in the attempt. This is a cool kind of like Expendables crew that took shape here.
Yeah, I love the Shattered Legions. It's also a cool way to, like, if you were playing the game, that you can play your Raven Guard or Iron Hands, or Salamanders. You know, it's not, you're just knocked out of the game altogether after the Drop Site Massacre.
Yeah.
So it has like both a utilitarian purpose, but the story is cool too, like you said, Mark. Like the Expendables crew.
Yeah.
They're
and like their ship that's been going around just like hitting and running like a ghost. You know, they think they narrow it down to one part of the system, and they get there and it's just an ambush, and they're like, well, we found them, but we're all dead now. Like, we have a question here. Can Horus win without Perturabo? Maybe the...
I was just going to say, like, I was going to ask, like, the more we talk and the more we discuss it, and based on like the books I've read and of things the articles and stuff, is that it's becoming more and more clear that I think Horus didn't have a chance at succeeding without Perturabo by his side. I think of all the Primarchs that he recruited on his side, I think Perturabo is the most important and the most useful, I think. That's based on, like, I'm reading the Solar War, the Siege of Terra at the moment, and he basically engineers that entire invasion. You know, it's his thing, pretty much. Abaddon's there, but he always does his thing, and he's a great strategist in his own right. But it's Perturabo who really engineers it.
Yeah,
and I think Horus would stand a chance really without him. But it's a discussion that's open to.
I really like that thought for sure. Like, yeah, we could go through the list of the 9 traitor legions, and a lot of them would be easy. Like, of course, the Alpha Legion. Yeah, they're nice to have. Yeah. They weren't critical. Where, how do you win this war against the Emperor? Well, you gotta fucking kick in his fortress doors, and to do that, you're gonna need the best siege specialist in the universe.
Fight against the greatest fortress builder in the universe too. So, yeah. Yeah, the other thing too is Perturabo is still pretty level-headed by the time they get to the Siege of Terra, relative to his other brothers, who fully like descend into chaos too. So, that's also critical. Fulgrim kind of just gets distracted and runs off. The World Eaters are just so psychotic; you can barely control them. Like they just kind of lose cohesion.
Yeah.
So you're kind of dependent on like the Night Lords and the Iron Warriors to like kind of keep some kind of and the I keep wanting to call them Luna Wolves. The Black were they called Black Legion or still Sons of Horus? Sons of Horus.
Yeah, Sons of Horus at this
Sons
point.
of Horus,
Yeah. So you need that core of like still somewhat rational troops to actually carry on with the objective too.
Yeah, if you plan this big siege on this section of the wall, and then the day comes and no one shows up, and you're messaging, and the Emperor's
Everyone's
children's like, "Oh, I gotta put my armor back on. Sorry, yeah, we'll be right there." Yeah, not useful.
Yeah.
Not like Perturabo.
Once again, he's not getting the credit, man. He should get the credit for the Siege of Terra.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The failure that was the siege.
That wasn't his fault. It was everyone else.
It was Horus.
Everyone else let him down.
Yeah.
He did his job. He breached the gates, man. He did his part.
True that.
All right, let's get into the Crone world. The combined fleet of the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children carved a path through the void with grim precision. Their destination set, the lost Eldari world of Idris. Once a jewel in the crown of the Eldari Empire, Idris had been a world favored by the goddess Lilith, now reduced to a cursed relic, a crone world festering within the malignant heart of the Eye of Terror. The world's existence was an affront to natural law, anchored impossibly in place amid the gravitational maelstrom of a supermassive black hole that churned out the core of the eternal warp storm. Here, reality bled into madness, and the galaxy spewed forth its unnatural refuse through a wound that could never heal. But for Perturabo and his traitor kin, the horrors of Idris were not deterrents. They were obstacles to be dismantled. At the heart of this forsaken world lay their true objective, the sepulchre of Isha's doom, a prize buried beneath the citadel of Amon Nai Shak Kalis. The citadel loomed over the entrance to the prison tomb of the Angel Exterminatus, a relic of unspeakable Xenos power. Perturabo, ever the master of siegecraft, would not be denied. The citadel's ancient defenses were irrelevant in the face of his relentless assault. Before committing to a ground invasion, the Iron Warriors unleashed the cold efficiency of orbital bombardment. This was no mere show of force, it was a mechanized prelude to annihilation. Standard procedure refined it into an art form. A cone of searing fire scoured the surface of Idris, obliterating structures that had defied the passage of tens of thousands of Terran years. Monuments to a dying race were reduced to ash in moments, their millennia of history irrelevant to the inexorable advance of the Iron Warriors' war machine. What remained was a barren, smoldering ring of pulverized earth, encircling the citadel like a noose tightening around a condemned throat. The once majestic towers and temples of Amon Nai Shak Kalis now stood as isolated relics, cut off from the planet's ravaged landscape by a churning firestorm of planet-cracking force. The Iron Warriors did not see beauty in destruction, they saw inevitability. In the aftermath of this calculated devastation, the invasion began. Waves of Thunderhawks, Stormbirds, Warhawks, and heavy planetary landers surged from the fleet's crowded embarkation decks. Bulk tenders descended into low orbit, disgorging thousands of troops. Troop carriers, armor, lifters, and supply barks. Each component of the assault perfectly timed, perfectly placed. The sky itself groaned under the weight of the descending war machine. Titanic gravity cushioned mass landers moved with ponderous authority, heralding the arrival of two titans from the Legio Mortis. Their colossal forms were harbingers of doom, striding into the charred landscapes as symbols of unstoppable force. And this was but the opening act. 8 more waves would follow, each one layering the planet with the full suffocating might of 2 entire Space Marine legions and their Imperial Army auxiliaries. Perturabo's design was simple, brutal, and absolute. The complete subjugation of Idris. the crushing of all resistance beneath an avalanche of iron and fire.
He's used this tactic a couple times now where he just like orbital bombards everything into a tiny circle where they're then trapped and then they have their way with them.
And it's like, what I don't really like, the note I dropped in is like at this point, there's been no
Resistance.
resistance on the planet. Like he's just come along, and effectively he's after this thing that I assume is like that he thinks is a tool. It's a weapon. We don't know what it is. But it's a weapon of some sort, and he's come into the orbit of this planet and just flattened everything. But there's actually no defenders that he's even aware of.
Yeah.
And he's just come in and just done it anyway. And it's super cool with the noose around where he thinks the site is and all that kind of stuff. But this just shows that he's just like, I'm here, I'm doing what I'm doing. And he just flattens everything before he's even seen a defender yet.
Yeah.
It's wild, man. It's wild.
Yeah.
Just goes from 0 to 100, lands his whole legion on the ground,
Yeah.
like for the greatest resistance, and
There's
then
no one there.
the ghost town for a while. Yeah.
All right, shall we get
Yes.
into
Perfect Eldar
Amandai
pronunciation,
Shak
Jordan.
Kalis? Is that how you say it?
You even had the right
saying that right?
posture and psychic essence when you said it.
Okay, good. The trader's assault commenced 5 solar hours after landfall, an act of calculated impatience. Despite the fortifications remaining incomplete, the landing zone lay almost encircled, yet the walls had not sealed shut, leaving gaps in the Iron Warrior's otherwise meticulous defense. Still, layers of minefields and sprawling acres of razor wire extended from the wall's outer edges, rendering any approach a death sentence for the unprepared. Only those armed with precise schematics and dormancy codes could hope to navigate the lethal terrain. Perturabo, ever the strategist, delegated the completion of the siege works to warsmith Toramino and 5,000 Iron Warriors. They were tasked with establishing battery positions for the 4th Legion's formidable store Bezak artillery. With their efforts underway, Perturabo ascended to the cupola of Tormentor, his heavily modified Shadow Sword super heavy tank, the embodiment of his iron will. The warriors had arrived in strength, their presence a hammer poised to strike, but the Emperor's children were no less numerous, their ostentation an affront to Perturabo's disciplined pragmatism. Fulgrim, clad in impossibly resplendent armor, positioned himself at the front of his legion. Though he had ceded command of the campaign to Perturabo, Fulgrim ensured his presence could not be ignored, a peacock strutting in the shadow of the Lord of Iron. Again, another way to contrast himself with Perturabo, I suppose.
Also, this tank sounds so cool, doesn't it? A heavily
Tormentor.
Is there a picture of it?
I want to have a look at that thing.
Yeah, I wonder if there is, but there's definitely like you can find shadow swords for sure. It's a big tank with a giant laser cannon on it, and I can just imagine Perturabo on the inside of it tweaking out that laser cannon and making it, way more powerful than it would normally be, adding rocket launchers onto the side, doing all types of crazy things to this tank. What's fun too about this tank is it's not like a Space Marine tank. This is an Imperial Guard tank that he kind of took for himself too. So it's not like this is not stock armory.
Serious. Lots of hazard stripes.
Yeah, I just looked up the article, and there's no official images.
The route into the citadel of Amandai Shak Kalis lay disturbingly unguarded, their advanced unopposed. Such ease bred suspicion in Perturabo's mind. He trusted nothing, least of all his silence. His Iron Warriors formed up in precise layered fortifications outside the citadel walls, a defensive barbican design not merely to protect their position, but to ensure a secure line of retreat, should it be required. In contrast, Fulgrim's forces fragmented into disparate warbands, their formations chaotic and undisciplined. Groups varied from 100 warriors to nearly 1,000, each led by a so-called captain. The grotesque ornamentation of their armor made rank indistinguishable, the line between leader and follower blurred beneath layers of gaudy X. With the fortified bridgehead secured, Perturabo advanced into the heart of Amon-Nai-Shak Kalis, leading his iron warriors alongside Fulgrim's disordered host. Their destination, the sepulchre of Isha's doom, a sprawling palace of alien decadence, its bulbous morn towers and sweeping ivory-adorned roofs mocking the cold efficiency of Imperial architecture. As the traitor forces pressed deeper into the sepulchre, they remained oblivious to the eyes watching from the shadows. Loyalist Astartes of the Sisypheum, outnumbered 1,000 to 1, observed silently, their minds already at work, devising an alternate route into the vast sepulchre, undeterred by the impossible odds. As they neared their goal, Fulgrim's thin patience frayed further. He prodded Perturabo with curt demands to hasten their progress. But the Lord of Iron remained unmoved. Perturabo studied his brother with a calculating eye, noting the unnatural sheen clinging to Fulgrim's form. It was not sweat that gleamed on his skin, but light, faint, yet unmistakable to Perturabo's gene-forged sight, capable of perceiving what even Astartes' eyes could not. Fulgrim's armor strained against his flesh, his features gaunt and drawn, as though his body itself was buckling under the weight of something unnatural. It was clear to Perturabo that his brother's vitality was a fragile facade, maintained only by sheer force of will. Fulgrim's captains fared no better. They resembled hounds at the end of a fraying leash, their bodies suffused with the same eerie radiance infecting their Primarch. It was a deathly light, alien and unwelcome, something that had no place within living flesh. Perturabo's distrust deepened with every step, the inevitability of Fulgrim's betrayal looming like a shadow in the recesses of his mind. Yet he pressed on, driven by a singular purpose, to see this mission through, regardless of the treacherous serpent at his side. As they approached the sepulchre's core, the dormant power at the heart of Lydrus shuddered in violent recognition. The presence of Slanesh's chosen, those marked by she who thirsts, stirred ancient malice from its slumber. The guardians of Lydrus woke, their wrath a silent echo in the void, ready to greet the intruders with the fury of a world long lost to darkness. Oh, this is an interesting scenario getting set up here.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole little bit with Fulgrim and like all his interactions with his brothers after he kind of becomes possessed. Some of them notice it. Most of them do, in fact. But yeah, Perturabo's another one who just has that like extra analytical kind of like, what's happening here? Yeah, just one more step removed from chaos while still like kind of being aware of it.
It's quite interesting that Fulgrim is the first. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, that he's the first Primarch to ascend to demonhood.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting, isn't it? He's the first one. Does that show a leniency on Slanesh's part, that it's easier to become a demon to ascend to demonhood with Slanesh than it is the other Chaos Gods? Because this is quite early on. This isn't that far into
the
timeline yet.
The thing with Fulgrim is like his possession slowly started happening long before even the Horus Heresy was planned, during that Lear campaign where he found the demon sword that started kind of whispering to him and corrupting him. So yeah, he was kind of corrupted outside of the typical Horus Heresy corruption flowchart where it's like Erebus to Primarch to Legion. Fulgrim has the sword as the top there.
Yeah. Cool. Amon-Nai-Shak Kalis. Thousands of crystalline forms stirred, shedding the stillness of ages. Their movements were slow, deliberate, like creatures wrenched from the depths of an eternal sleep. The gems embedded in their bulbous heads ignited with vibrant hues, infusing their once delicate, glass-like bodies with an unsettling resilience. They were not mere statues, they were the wraiths of Lydrus, the dead Eldar risen from their silent repose. They came in endless waves, their grotesquely organic motions mocking the mechanical precision, true automata. Within moments, they descended upon the traitor forces, both within and beyond the citadel. Their assault relentless and all-encompassing. I think what's cool here is like the juxtaposition between the clinical, mechanical work of the Iron Warriors versus the organic nature of the Eldar. It's a really cool kind of image you get from that scene.
Yeah.
Perturabo looked in the brutal calculus of survival, fought with the cold efficiency of a master strategist. Yet even he could not ignore the absence that grew beside him. Fulgrim had vanished, slipped away amidst the chaos, as a Lord of Iron had always suspected he might. The realization struck like a bitter confirmation of long-held distrust. Without hesitation, Perturabo pursued, stepping into the sickly green luminescence that bled from the chamber's heart. This was no mundane energy, no byproduct of machinery. It was the distilled essence of countless souls, the residue of death itself. Downward he descended, caught in an unending spiral towards a light that refused to brighten. No matter how far he plunged, the descent felt eternal, stretching the limits of reason, until suddenly it ended. Fulgrim awaited him, poised at the beginning of a slender bridge that defied the very concept of architecture. Arching out into the core of an impossibly vast spherical void, dozens of similar bridges extended from the chamber's equator, all converging towards a seething orb of jade light that blazed with the intensity of false sun. Lidris, Perturabo realized, was a hollow world, its heart a cavernous expanse cradling this malignant star. As the cold truth crystallized in his mind, Perturabo confronted his brother, the pieces falling into place with grim inevitability. There was no Angel Exterminatus. There never had been. Fulgrim, with his serpentine smile, confirmed the betrayal. There was no weapon, because he was to be the Angel Exterminatus. Perturabo's lip curled in disdain. Fulgrim's vanity had always been insatiable, but this delusion surpassed even his most grandiose fantasies. Without another word, Perturabo advanced, Forgebreaker in hand, his intent clear and merciless. But Fulgrim, ever the deceiver, unleashed a single word. It slithered through the air like a living thing, its nightmarish syllables clawing at Perturbo's mind. Pain lanced through his skull, driving him to one knee. The realization hit him like the strike of a forge hammer. Fulgrim's treachery had been in motion long before this confrontation. On Hydra Caudatus, Fulgrim had presented Perturabo with a gift, a cloak of the finest ermine, its edges trimmed with foxbat fur, embroidered with spirals that whispered of perfection in the golden ratio. A chrome steel skull clasped the garment, a gemstone the size of a clenched fist gleaming from its forehead. At first, the gem had been black, veined with delicate threads of gold. But as their journey into the Eye of Terror progressed, the stone had transformed, its hue shifting to a solid, ominous gold, pulsing with a heartbeat that was not its own. It was a Molgatar stone, the Harvester. It had been draining Perturbo's strength, feeding on his life force with each passing moment. Now, with the Lord of Iron weakened, Fulgrim stood on the brink of his long sought-out apotheosis. Perturbo had been nothing more than a means to an end, a sacrifice upon which Fulgrim would ascend. Their fates intertwined in a bitter betrayal. The two Primarchs rose within the shade of jade light, emerging into the sepulchre above, where the chaos of battle raged on, indifferent to the personal war unfolding in its heart. And I think that's Fulgrim's gone ahead and obviously double crossed him, and this I think if this was a movie, this would be the ultimate arc, wouldn't it, of the Lord of Iron. You know, he had trust. It's probably his last time that he truly probably trusts one of his brothers. He went like, and this is his arc. This is when it happens in the film, when he goes, he gets betrayed finally, and he realizes that there is no hope now, and Fulgrim's arrogance is truly never ending, and you kind of feel a little bit of sympathy for him, a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been sympathetic the whole time. What are you talking about?
But like Fulgrim's the art kid, isn't he, at school, right? He's like the like in those like
Flamboyant.
yeah, exactly. He's like the kind of art kid, and then he kind of made friends with this kid now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You got the loner school shooter type becoming friends with the like traumatic art kid who betrays the school shooter kid, which is never a good thing to do.
No, it's not.
Very true.
And now we get to the apotheosis of Fulgrim's plan all along. Fulgrim cast his brother aside with a casual flick, and Perturabo tumbled through the air, a broken figure spiraling to the ground. The sound of metal and crystal shattering was a sickening punctuation to the fall. A trail of blood lingered in the air, painting the space between the two Primarchs in a sweeping crimson arc, and Perturabo's body landed with a hollow thud. He lay still, the Lord of Iron's form a lifeless heap, shattered and bleeding out before the onlooking Astartes. The chamber held its breath as every eye of every warrior, loyalist and traitor alike, turned towards the tragic tableau unfolding before them. This moment was irreversible shift in the course of history. Above, Fulgrim was no longer the being who had descended to Idris. He floated, weightless, his arms aglow with unnatural, almost unbearable brilliance, as if it contained within it the very light of the stars themselves. Fighting to break free, his eyes, dark and empty, held within them an abyss, a space where the once cherished ideals of the Emperor's children had withered into a grotesque lust for power, sensation, and godhood. The Phoenician's form radiated vitality, a malignant energy that burned hotter than any flame. Out of the place in the decaying shell of the world already forsaken. He was no longer an angel. He was something more, or perhaps something far worse. Just as Fulgrim's hand reached out to seize his ultimate desire, Perturabo, broken but not yet finished, stirred. He rose from the wreckage of his fall, the weight of the Mugatar stone heavy in his grasp. A relic, a grotesque reminder of his brother's machination, pulsed with a sickening, rhythmic beat as it drained the very essence of Perturabo's being. Yet in that moment, something ancient stirred within him, a fire that refused to be extinguished. The Lord of Iron advanced step by step, his eyes cold and calculating, but his heart thudding with a stranger, bitter sorrow. He extended his hand, the Mugatar stone held high over the shaft below, like a sacrificial offering. He sought something in Fulgrim's eyes, some sign that his brother he had once known, the one who had stood by him in the darkest days of the Imperium, was still somewhere within this warped shell. But Fulgrim's offered no remorse. There was no regret, no sign of shame or hesitation. Perturabo's heart tightened, for he understood now, with crushing certainty, that his brother he once had was gone, lost in the pursuit of a twisted narcissistic ascension, no longer the angel, but a god. In disgust, Perturabo left the stone fall, casting it into the depths of the shaft. It was a final deliberate rejection. The battle erupted in a cacophony of gunfire as loyalist Astartes clad in black armor surged into the chamber. The Iron Hands had arrived. This was from the Siphatheme. What was their ship called?
Yes, they are the syphilis on Horus's shaft.
Yes. Well, they had arrived, their mail fists raised in defiance, charging headlong into the fray, and the chamber soon became a battlefield of thunderous violence. Loyalist against traitor, the lines drawn. But within the maelstrom, the Primarch stood alone at the center, Perturabo broken yet defiant, kneeling with his back to the light, while Fulgrim hovered untouched, bound to his brother by some dark, invisible tether that neither the call of battle nor the bloodshed could sever. Amidst the fury, Sherokin, a Ravenguard warrior, spotted the Mugatar stone as it fell. His instinct screamed that this relic, this vile thing, had to be destroyed. He seized a bolter from the fallen Emperor's children, Astartes, and fired. The shot rang out, striking the stone with a resounding crack, and with that shot, the very fabric of their twisted connection unraveled. That's one hell of a shot from that Ravenguard, to notice that falling stone, grab a rifle, shoot it, like, heck of a move.
Yeah, Sherokin has a lot of, like, overly, you can tell he's like the author's favorite character type situation. He's got all kinds of fancy abilities and stuff.
The moment the stone was shattered, Perturabo's lifeblood was freed from its draining grip. His strength surged back in a flood. And in that same instant, Fulgrim's body arced in agony, as though the power contained within the stone resonated within his own twisted desires. The essence of both Primarchs intertwined, feeding off each other, unlocking a brutal potential neither had anticipated. Fulgrim's armor began to burn away, flakes of gold and crimson drifting like ash in the chaos of the chamber. Beneath it, his body swelled grotesquely, his flesh glowing like a furnace of heat. a living firestorm that threatened to consume him. Spectral flames of pink and purple danced around him, their hunger barely restrained. And yet it was Perturabo who rose first, fully restored, his eyes filled with cold, calculating resolve. He hefted Forgebreaker, the mighty hammer, onto his shoulder as if it was a mere extension of his own arm. Fulgrim, burning with divine ambition, met his brother's gaze. He knew what was coming. In his eyes there was no fear, only the arrogant certainty that it had to have been done. With a brutal, precise motion, Perturabo swung Forgebreaker with all the finality of a headsman's axe. The hammer connected with Fulgrim's bloated form, and in an instant, the Phoenician's body was split wide open, and the battle was over. The Lord of Iron had done what was necessary, and it was done.
Yeah. An interesting note is on Forgebreaker is that hammer Fulgrim made and gifted to Ferrus Manus, who, as we know, was, the brother that Fulgrim would ultimately kill and take the hammer back from. And there's like a lot of betrayal between brothers around that weapon.
Yeah.
Because then here's Perturabo using it to hit his own brother again too. So
Yeah.
Now how frequent is it that a Primarch kills another Primarch?
Not. And at this point, only one had been killed. And like none had died during the Great Crusade or anything.
Right.
Well, we don't know what happened to the two missing ones. But...
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
The second and third or whatever.
Second and 11th.
Oh. 11th,
The people think that Vulcan is dead at this point, but they're not sure. Some people believe that Vulcan lives, but
But
he isn't.
Who
dead.
is he killed by? But he wasn't killed by Primarch.
He disappears in a blast.
Okay.
But also like Cormac Hurst tries to kill him loads of times, doesn't he? Because he captures him, right? And then he tries like 15 different methods to kill him. And
yeah, that's later on, I think, and it's not known to the wider galaxy. Like Vulcan is sequestered.
So like at this point, this is like a pretty novel event for like these two Primarchs to get into this kind of a fight, like a fight to the death, and then one of them actually kills the other.
Yeah.
Sort of. Like they did fight. Like there's lots of Primarch on Primarch fighting that happens during the Sven massacre.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only one that really is a fatality is Ferrus Manus up until this point.
Okay. Gotcha.
And even at this point, there's more. Fulgrim's mortal form crumbled under the brutal force of Perturabo's warhammer, the blow sending a shrieking cry of birth and death echoing through the chamber. A violent explosion of energy erupted from the Phoenician's mangled flesh, a blinding light that flared brighter than 1,000 suns. Wow. Just have to slip in every Legion name in there, eh?
Yeah.
Brighter than 1,000 suns, too pure and radiant to behold directly. It burned the eyes of all those in the chamber, searing into their minds with its overwhelming brilliance. Even the most hardened of warriors recoiled, unable to tear themselves from the sight, drawn by the terrible beauty of the transformation. The death of Fulgrim had been swift, but what followed was nothing short of a grotesque rebirth. In the center of the infernal light, a figure hovered, Fulgrim, but this was not the brother Perturabo had known. This was no mere mortal, no warrior to be fought. The godlike figure before him was as perfect as the day the Emperor had conceived him, untouched by the degradation of vanity that had so marked his flesh in the past. His body had shed its imperfection, but it was no longer a form bound by mortal limits. The light clung to Fulgrim's bones, with cracked and splintered as his flesh liquefied, reforming and reshaped. A serpent's tail began to coil from the body, thickening with scales, hardened chitin plates, fusing together to form a grotesque mockery of beauty. A truly abominable rebirth. This was no longer his brother. This was something else, something beyond. Perturabo took a step forward, dread pooling in his chest. He had destroyed Fulgrim's body, but what had emerged from the ashes was a monstrous effigy of will and power. Fulgrim's agonized face contorted into a rapture that only soul lost to chaos could feel. The ascension was undeniable. His body twisted further, two obsidian horns bursting from his skull, curling back like twin daggers ready to rend the very fabric of reality. It was then that Perturabo knew. His brother was gone, consumed by something far darker than anything he had ever feared. Fulgrim had become a prince of Slaanesh, the first of the traitor Primarchs to shed his mortal form and rise as a demon prince. As Fulgrim ascended, leaving behind the ruin of his previous existence, he spoke cryptically to Perturabo. He spoke of a meeting yet to come, a renewal of their bond, a hollow promise that only served to deepen Perturabo's resentment. There would be no redemption for Fulgrim. He had fallen too far, and the bonds that had once tied them were irreparably severed. Then, in a final burst of blinding energy, Fulgrim and the Emperor's children vanished, leaving nothing but the faintest trace of their passing. They were gone, and with them the last vestige of Perturabo's brother. The death of Fulgrim left behind.
Yeah, this is interesting, like how much we kind of get locked in these stories where the Primarchs are kind of fighting each other. They get locked in like a battle, and then they kind of disperse and they rejoin. Like we talked about Lionel Johnson and Conrad Cruz, and they're kind of battling, hunting back and forth throughout the heresy. It's interesting, like throughout the whole Horus Heresy, Perturabo basically has two known events that he kind of does. He does this little adventure with Fulgrim, which is very notable because it's the first time like a demon Primarch happens. So very notable for sure. And the other time is just during the Siege of Terra. But like they go on these wild goose chases together. All the Primarchs, it seems.
The death of Fulgrim left behind only destruction. As the Emperor's children disappeared into the depths of the warp, the crone world of Idris began to tear itself apart. The ancient life force that had once protected the world began to fail, and the world buckled under the force of the inevitable. The black hole that lay at the heart of the Eye of Terror loomed ever closer, its insatiable hunger pulling at the fabric of reality itself. The remaining Iron Hands, those who had dared to stay and witness the final moments, gathered their wounded and retreated. They looked upon Perturabo with contempt, but they knew better than to fight him now. Even they understood the futility of such an attempt. Perturabo let them go. He did not care to waste his time with the broken remnants of the Loyalist forces. As the Iron Hands retreated, the Lord of Iron stood firm, unmoving. He watched as the world around him crumbled, the last gasps of the Eldar crumbling empire lost in the chaos. But his mind was already set elsewhere, towards a future only he could envision. His fleet battered and battered would make its way deeper into the heart of the Eye. On board the Iron Blood, his flagship, Perturabo stood with the Triarchs, the final remnants of his Iron Warriors. Their fate seemed sealed, their doom inevitable. They were trapped at the precipice of annihilation, pulled towards the unyielding grasp of the black hole. It would be an end, a final death, or so they thought. Forward, Perturabo declared, his voice cold, devoid of any hesitation. The Triarchs around him looked to one another, questioning, doubting, yet bound by their loyalty. They knew their Lord's mind, and they knew that there was no turning back. He had led them here, and there was no retreat. They would descend into the Eye. They would survive, or they would die, but they would not go backward. The fleet surged forward, and Perturabo led them into the heart of the Eye of Terror. What awaited them would be an unknown, but as always, Perturabo would carve his path through the darkest chaos. There was no other choice.
He kind of started going on this journey with Perturabo. Like there's that little bit of curiosity, that need to know. He's like, what is this thing that's been haunting me? And he thought he might have got some answers with Fulgrim, but no, he only got betrayal and heartbreak there. But he still has that, like, I need to figure out what this Eye of Terror thing really is. Takes the plunge.
It's his destiny,
Yeah.
right? It's like built into his psyche that he needs to do that, and all of these events that occur from like Fulgrim double crossing him to the Emperor's treatment and all that kind of stuff. It's all leading up to this point and him being driven towards the Eye of Terror, the one thing that's haunted him, and the one thing that I think is going to free him as well. So it's super interesting.
So he goes in.
I do always find, like, even just to go back to Fulgrim too, like, I find the concept of apotheosis kind of fascinating, and we see a lot of it in mythology. There's a lot of heroes that are like trying to ascend to godhood or some sort of divinity. And I kind of like how they play with that idea in 40K too. But specifically just seeing like the dynamic between Fulgrim and Perturabo, where like he suspects something is different, but he doesn't really quite get it. And it's not until, the final sacrifice is made and he kills him that like the great unveiling is happens,
Yeah.
the apocalypse, if you will. because the word apocalypse literally means the unveiling. So and that's kind of what there's this like apocalyptic event that happens with. I don't know. I just the whole idea is like very interesting.
Yeah, like you got these Primarchs who are already, mortals would look at them and think they're already gods. They've lived for hundreds of years.
Yeah,
they regenerate. They can shoot psychic powers, but even then, there's still that need for more power, more corruption, or whatever.
Yeah, and also another note to just like sort of a interesting thing again that happens a lot in mythology is like. Whenever anthropologists have found and archaeologists have found evidence that like a lot of mythical creatures or like gods who are part animal and part human, they're like sort of based on some sort of real event where someone was sacrificed, and the legend grows that like the belief is that once the human sacrifice happens, they like ascend into this godhood or transmute or transform into some sort of grotesque creature, and it's almost I just see a lot of like a contrast here with that whole like I don't know that cliche that's like deep in our own history, where you almost have to be sacrificed in order to become like ascend into have this apotheosis thing happen.
Yeah, you have to shed your mortal form.
Yeah. Exactly.
Kind of jumping on that point too, Jordan. We had gone over this kind of transformation in the Fulgrim episode, and I remember I mentioned that it seems strange to me because Fulgrim failed in like the whole idea was that he was going to sacrifice Perturabo to ascend. Fulgrim failed in that attempt, but he still got to ascend. And now rereading the story, I come to realize that a sacrifice was made, and it wasn't Perturabo. It was Fulgrim actually who was sacrificed, and that is what allowed him act. So the betrayal the betrayer was betrayed, and that still empowered chaos to elevate.
Like that's a really good point. Like, was the final task for him to ascend, to betray a brother? Was that his like final, like obviously to achieve demonhood you have to do all these like tasks, you have to do all these things to appease the god. So was that
I don't think it was explicit, but I think that was the implication. That's why Fulgrim was kind of leading Perturabo along, and like he did betray him with that clasp and everything to kind of like weaken him and eventually take him to the place where he would sacrifice him. So I think the implication is there. I don't think it's stated strictly that like Slaanesh demands a Primarch sacrifice. But I think it's the process of betrayal and all that did ultimately serve the purpose. Like it's almost like kind of Corn, like he doesn't care where the blood flows as long as it flows. Kind of the same idea of like the betrayal just needed to happen. It doesn't matter who gets betrayed here.
Yeah, because it's not like Fulgrim necessarily was the beneficiary. Like he died, and I think a demon Primarch, like a new creature, or that demon creature is now what's in charge. Like Fulgrim, adios, he's gone. Is that how that kind of worked?
Well, I don't know. Again, kind of speaking to like the mythological interpretation, the ideas of death and rebirth, right? Like, are you dead or are you coming back in a new form?
Sure.
Right. It's almost like, even in Christianity, that idea of like, Jesus dies and has to come back as Jesus, right? It can't be like another creature taking its place to really be a resurrection, right? So in Fulgrim's case, it's almost like an inversion of that. Like, yes, Fulgrim may have physically died, but it is also Fulgrim that has emerged as a demon.
Okay.
Like a demon prince.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same is true for all demon princes. It's not that you become something else, but you're still there,
Yeah.
Like, but it gets weird because in the whole thing with Horus, and this is where it gets complicated because not to get too far ahead, but there's a whole idea of like Horus also not truly being Horus anymore and being something other. And like there's always this back and forth, and they did the same thing with Fulgrim, and I actually don't know where they ended on the whole like debate, because for a while there was a demon in Fulgrim's body. With Horus, there's this whole implication of an inner Horus who's like still there somewhere, and then that's the part that the Emperor breaks through to like when Horus sheds that tear. Anyways, that's a huge side tangent. yeah.
We need our Warhammer theologians.
Well,
Debate for hundreds
no,
of
here's
years.
the thing, though.
Yeah.
We talked to Rick Priestley yesterday, me and Christian, and one of the things that stood out to me, he's like, "Yeah, I'm the guy who came up with the one sentence for the Horus Heresy, and when coming up with it, I said it 10,000 years in the past because I'm like, that's an unfathomable amount of time. No one will ever touch it. It's supposed to be this mythological time. We don't know what's happening," and I just felt so validated that. Sometimes the more we get into,
We're not supposed to be.
we're not
here.
supposed to
Yeah.
know all these little
Yeah.
nitty-gritty details. And yeah, where the fuck is Fulgrim? What exactly is this process? Are we supposed to know? Not according to Rick Priestley.
Mark, how is 40K supposed to sell books?
The other
Don't
thing
go
he said
back.
that was really funny. He's like, 40K books, never read those.
Yeah. He did not.
Did not look kindly on the novels. But
Well, don't tell Graham McNeil.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, but the moral of this story ultimately is don't get human sacrificed by your brother or anyone really, for that matter.
Try to avoid
Try
that at
to.
all costs.
You can't always.
You will not ascend to Godhead.
Yeah.
We know that.
It happens.
No matter what the voices tell you in the day.
So what happens in the eye? I think I missed a little section here, to be honest. What happens when he goes into the eye?
We're not supposed to know, Mark. It's supposed to be legend.
Oh yes, okay. Well then we'll go to the Siege of Terra.
I have no idea.
In the wake of the catastrophic events within the Eye of Terror, the Iron Warriors were unleashed upon the Imperium. Their transformation into fully fledged devotees of chaos, an inevitable conclusion to their endless thirst for destruction. No longer confined to the grinding methodical sieges that marked their existence for so long, Perturabo found a twisted joy in the freedom to fight in the ways that transcended the tedious demands of trench warfare. This was not just warfare, it was the full manifestation of his hatred for the Imperium, a chance to raise, destroy, and conquer with no hesitation, no restraint. Deployed across the galaxy, the Iron Warriors took their place as harbingers of chaos, with dozens of warsmiths, grand battalion commanders, leading the charge. They carved a swath through the Imperium worlds, each planet conquered becoming another tribute to the heresy, each tithing its resource to further the war effort. With the height of the Fourth Legion's reach pressed upon the Imperium like a vice, its influence spreading further with every victory, with every conquered star system. But it was on Olympia, the homeworld of his origins, where Perturabo's cruelty found its most personal expression. There a dark new empire of iron was forged, his legacy solidified in blood and iron. His hatred of the Imperium fully realized, yet for all his efforts to carve out a new dominion of destruction, it was the Siege of Terra that consumed his focus. Alongside the other traitor legions, Perturabo led a portion of the Iron Warriors to the very heart of the Imperium, to Terra itself, to deliver the final crushing blow to the Emperor's dream. At Terra, Perturabo took a preserved pleasure in bombardment of the Emperor's imperial palace, overseeing the destruction of its defenses with an obsessive fervor. It was a personal vendetta against Rogal Dorn, whose imperial fist had long been a thorn in his side. The masterful fortifications that Dorn had constructed seemed to mock Perturabo's own talents, but now they were reduced to rubble before the might of chaos. There was something uniquely satisfying in the moment for Perturabo, as he tore down what Dorn had so meticulously built. For every crumbled wall, every shattered defense was a testament to his superiority. However, this satisfaction was fleeting. Whether Dorn's defenses would have truly stood against the Iron Warriors, whether the Emperor's final bastion would have weathered the onslaught, remains a question to the lost to time. The sudden, premature death of Horus at the hands of the Emperor disrupted the siege before it could reach its climax. Perturabo would never know of his legion's unrelenting siege, would have been the final blow to the Imperium, or if Dorn's defenses, his life work, might have seen them through. Yet remained was the bitter knowledge that their fate was never fully determined, but their destruction had been thwarted by the forces beyond their control, the death of Horus. Yeah, so they're kind of put into this war, and like this was kind of. This is what he's been waiting for. He's been itching for a chance to kind of fuck with Rogal Dorn since the last time he did it, and even since the Great Crusade. And then he finally gets this kind of chance to really prove, like, this is your best work, let's fuck it up. And he doesn't fully get to see it to conclusion.
Yeah, no, I was going to add a point there. It's like I think we're like skimming over some of the incredible achievements that Perturabo had in the lead up to just the direct siege of the palace on the actual like soil of Terra, right? Like the Mandeville point that you have to enter into the solar system is by Pluto, from what I remember from Solar War, but correct me if I'm wrong. And they had to fight all the way through the entire solar system, consistently battling like different space stations and whole entire fleets and different like sectors of defense by different kind of like commanders. And he basically engineered that whole attack. And he had to control like hundreds of thousands of ships, multiple different attack vectors, different sort of bases he had to have combat with. And I think to like judge him purely based on the fact that he didn't get an opportunity to like kill the emperor himself or smash up the palace more is just a shame, because I think he showed how much of a great strategy he is and how his strength got them all the way to Terra is enough for a win.
That's a fun thought. Like, what if
Yeah.
Perturabo, when he was younger, he got a hug and some acknowledgement? Would he have become Warmaster? Because, like you said, like he is a very good Warmaster and was able to kind of outsmart even Rogal Dorn and the Emperor in this whole kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, and he's really smart because he uses like human shields loads and stuff, and he uses all different like strategies to make sure that he's not wasting his best forces, and he uses kind of like pirates and that kind of stuff. And there's a really cool story in Solar War where Perturabo collects up like gangsters and gangers and criminals and stuff on planets they've attacked, and there's 400,000 of them in like the hull of like a spaceship, and he pumps in like drugs and alcohol and like all kinds of stuff, and all these guys are like completely mental by the time they get to the base, and they just open the doors and just release these 400,000 criminals onto like secure bases, and he just watches from a distance and lets the world burn, like, and that's kind of what he does. He goes like, I'm not going to waste my space marines on this. I'm just going to use a load of gangers and just send them in there, and let them weather the storm. And that's where his like intelligence comes in and his ruthlessness. And I think that's where Perturabo is really, really powerful.
Yeah, like a lot of the Primarchs have some type of like care for humanity, you know, but there is no value to life within the Iron Warriors. You're going to the death march and you're going to that battle line. That's a cool little story with the druggies.
I was doing some background research while you were reading there, Mark, and I looked up what happened between that missing section you had there.
Perfect. Yeah, what kind of happened?
So between going through the black hole. So in short, a couple of things. They ended up near Talarn, the planet Talarn of the Talarn Desert Raider fame. And they discovered what's called a black oculus, which is a warp gate that says it's more ancient than the Eldar, so it's not super clear who built it. And that gate unleashes demons, and it even attracts the attention of the Eldar and the Black Library, and the Eldar kind of like fight back against Perturabo's opening of this gate. And then shortly after that whole bit, Horus kind of sends him around, and this is kind of strange, and this is like very much glossed over lexicanum what I'm reading, so I don't know about the details here, but it looks like Horus just sends him kind of to the far reaches, because the Horus Heresy is grinding on over like a multi-year campaign. So once again, Perturabo kind of gets sidelined to do the dirty work at Horus's direction now. So he's like sent off to fight in the fringes, but still these grinding sieges. And he keeps like following Horus's orders and doing kind of the same thing that he did before. So no doubt that's still feeding into like that bitterness and lack of recognition. He switched teams and he's still getting treated the same way on the new side.
Yeah.
They fight the Ultramarines, have a bunch of different side adventures. He is being more, ever since that interaction with the Oculus Gate, he is more in touch with chaos and the warp. So that's kind of where his corruption is coming from. Like, he is still being exposed to it. I think Jax mentions in the comments there too. Horus calls back all his forces to muster on Ulanor before they launch into the Terran campaign. And that's where Perturabo fights with actually Demon Angron. Angron is ascended by that point. They get into it, and Perturabo's like taunting taunting Angron, telling him like he's just a slave to chaos now. He's always been a slave. If anyone knows Angron's story, he's got a big thing about slavery. But ultimately, they do end up resolving their conflict, and they all muster at Ullanor and then take off for Terra. So,
oops, I missed that little bit.
In other words, ultimately, yeah, they all get together on Ullanor and then go after Terra. Just seems like a way that GW just stretched the story, to be honest.
Yeah, like it's just a meeting. Like him and Angron, did they really need to fight?
Yeah, like there's maybe some character development. You do see that like those divides again, where Perturabo isn't just like the other Primarchs. He's not like the other traitor Primarchs. He's still a loner amongst the chaos side too. He doesn't see himself as a slave to chaos the way that, Fulgrim and Angron and, the rest of them are becoming. And I think that for character development, that makes sense. Does it need to be this whole like multi-episode story? Probably not. But...
All right. Sorry, Mark, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so the heresies ended. They went to this Terra. They tried to bash down the gates, and they bashed down a lot of them, but ultimately the Horus Heresy failed. And we go to the post-heresy era.
Cool. So let's jump into the post-heresy. So after the fall of Horus and the chaotic retreat from Terra, Perturabo, filled with a burning desire for vengeance, set his sights on the Imperial fists. The brutal Siege of Terra had left him with a bitter, festering resentment towards Rogal Dorn and his unyielding, arrogant warriors. With the dust of failed rebellion settling, Perturabo began meticulously planning his revenge. His method was not one of glory or honor, but a carefully constructed trap designed to dismantle his hated rival. I'm just going to say it, like Rogal Dorn is the quarterback, high school kind of good-looking kid who walks around in a yellow jacket. If you're going to talk about comparisons, that's him, right? And
we're going to this high school setting.
Yeah, the principal loves them.
We're doing all the hot.
Yeah, and he's like, he walks around that jacket, like a yellow, like one of those like jackets that all the high school kids wear, like all those jocks wear. And he just walks around, he hates him, and he's like, this vengeance.
The varsity jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with like IH on it and IF, sorry. And it's like, yeah, but this story is super cool. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, it's cool to see like how after the heresy, other legions they kind of broke, or like the Emperor's Children say, shattered, and now they're not really capable even form war bands anymore. But yeah, the Iron Warriors, on the other hand, they're like, I don't think we're done yet. Let's lure some Imperial fists. We didn't get enough of them at the Siege of Terra, and right away they start setting up a trap to then themselves get sieged. Like, we sieged you, now you siege us, and maybe that will resolve this conflict.
Cool. All right, so we're jumping into the Battle of the Iron Cage, which is amazing. Sebastia's 4 became the setting for his vengeance, a world transformed into a mockery of imperial arrogance. There, the Eternal Fortress was built, an enormous bastion sprawling over 20 square miles, bristling with bunkers, towers, minefields, and tank traps, all deliberately shaped in the blasphemous form of an 8-pointed star of chaos. It was carefully crafted, deceptive design, trap designed to appear impregnable to lure Dorn into making the very mistake he will regret. And what I love about this is how they're, and Mark, you touched on it just now, but the roles are reversed, and it's a challenge and an insult to Rogal Dorn. It's very, very personal. Like, Perturabo is known as a siege breaker, as an attacker, and he's mocking and insulting Dorn by taking his skills and using them against him, and creating this fortress as unbreakable, and it's even an 8-point star. Like, how insulting can you get? And it's so, yeah, it's amazing, and that he's just going through this, and it's all built for one man. It's all built for one man to get him, and I think like it's so personal.
I like the different design techniques between Rogal Dorn and Perturabo. One's like, okay, 8-pointed star, and the other one's like, okay, the wings of an Aquila, arm each end of the battlements, and like different shapes I like for construction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. And when we get into the next paragraph, like Perturabo knew exactly what Rogal Dorn is like. He's an arrogant, just willful man who just can't turn down a challenge to beat one of his brothers down. So when word of this fortress reached Rogal Dorn, he issued a public proclamation, a fall of the usual pompous bravado. He would dig Perturabo out of his hole and bring him back to Terra in an iron cage. He expected an honourable battle. He would be severely disappointed. Perturabo, ever the strategist, had no intention of giving Dorn the satisfaction of a fair fight. From the moment the Imperial fists arrived, 4 companies strong, Perturabo isolated them from their orbital support, fragmenting the enemy into manageable pieces. Each move was calculated, each step a precise execution of his plan to grind them down, to dismantle them piece by piece. I mean, it's just built just to destroy them. The Imperial fists, foolhardy in their belief that they could simply overpower the defences, pushed through, managing to reach the so-called heart of the Eternal Fortress. And I love this bit. But there they found no central keep, no stronghold to conquer. Instead, there was nothing but an open space and only more layers of traps, more deadly defences.
Gotcha, bitch.
I love that. Like, I know, I love that. Like that's the punchline, right? It's like they fight through all these defences, they get through all this barbed wire, all these bunkers, and the Imperial fists are like your brothers are dying around you, and you're clambering through, and then you get to the middle, you think, yeah, I've done it, and there's nothing there apart from more traps, and it's like. It's just it's amazing. It's like it's just so cool. The fortress was a mirage, a decoy. The true strength of the trap lay in the vast killing ground that surrounded it. A wasteland where Imperial fists would die in droves, separated from their brothers, each man fighting for his life, his comrades' bodies offering the only cover. So this went on for 6 days. But by the 6th day, the battle was descending into madness. The Imperial fists fought without cohesion, isolated, disorientated, using their fallen brothers' bodies as shields against the relentless assault of the Iron Warriors. For 3 more weeks, the siege dragged on, with Perturabo orchestrating every step, knowing that his enemy was too proud, too rigid, to see the trap until it was too late. The Imperial fists were worn down, their morale shattered, but their relief came not through victory, but through the arrival of Rogal Dorn and the Ultramarines, who finally forced the Iron Warriors to withdraw. I'm just going to say this now. How many times has the Ultramarines turned up and saved people? Like, it happens quite often, right? Like Rogal Dorn just turns up at the moment of loss, and then he just kind of saves the day.
Yeah.
Someone has to do it.
And it's always him.
Someone has to be the hero.
Oh, just like in the last moment, isn't it? Like, yeah. But I think this is really interesting as well. This sort of speaks to the character of like Rogal Dorn, that he's especially arrogant, and Perturabo has done like a perfect read on him here, and he knows exactly his psychology. He knows he won't give up, and he will grind and grind and grind. If it wasn't for Rogal Dorn, he would have carried on until he lost everyone.
Yeah, like I imagine with every lost battle brother, he just gets that much more dug in. Rogal Dorn, where he's like, I lost another. Like at the end of the day, casualty report, he's like, another one. Like, that's it. We got to go harder. Tomorrow we go even harder. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think this is why Perturabo, I'm going to say, is better than Rogal Dorn. He is, because he's proven himself here. He's read him, he knows his psychology, and he's beaten him. And it's only for Rogal Dorn in the way he won. But the damage was done. Rogal Dorn, once proud and unshakable, was left broken by the relentless cruelty of Perturabo design. His chapter, the Imperial Fist, was shattered, crippled for nearly 2 decades, unable to fight as they rebuilt their forces. Yet the true prize of the battle was the gene seed of over 400 Imperial Fists, captured and delivered to Perturabo's will. In his victory, Perturabo offered these sacred organs as sacrifices to the Dark Gods, further solidifying his place among them. His brutal accomplishment earned him the rare and coveted acclamation of the ruinous powers. His reward for such ruthless ingenuity, the rank of Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. With this victory, Perturabo and his Iron Warriors retreated to the Eye of Terror. Fleeing with their fellow traitor legions, there they claimed a new demon world, Medringard, where Perturabo crafted a fortress of unimaginable horror. A citadel Of iron and stone, it became the heart of the Iron Warriors' new dominion, where they ruled over a slave population, their torment a reminder of their lord's cruel and unyielding will. To his sons, Perturabo became a saviour. They believed they had been spared from a needless sacrifice in the name of the false emperor, but in his ascent to demonhood, they found new purpose, a new loyalty to the one who had led them to victory and to a new, terrible life in the service of chaos.
Hmm.
Very cool.
Very cool.
And I think the planet measuring guide is really, really cool as well. There's a really good book, Dead Sky and Black Sun, and it's got like white sand and white sky. Obviously, all the factories and stuff and the fortifications that have been built by Perturabo, but it's got a black sun, and I think that it's such a haunting planet. But by like if you think about it, and there's not many pictures around, and I've done a few things on it, but it's just that haunting image of a black sun and everything else is white, and it's not all like thunderstorms and raining blood and all that kind of stuff. It's like it's very haunting, it's not like classically horror. It's
yeah.
Have you seen Dune Part 2? Where they go to the Harkonnen homeworld? They have like a black sun and everything's black and white and very like high contrast thermal camera. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from your description there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
It's really cool.
Everything kind of works out for Perturabo at this point, He gets away from the Horus Heresy scot-free. He fucks up some brothers. He gets his own world. He ascends to demonhood. It's all coming up pretty.
Yeah, there's a little bit of controversy. I remember a while ago now, because of the Perturabo Demon Prince. Mark, I don't know if you remember. Yeah, it kind of contrasted with what Perturabo had always been described as being very like anti-chaos. Like that edgy atheist joke I made earlier was kind of like his vibe, and they did play into that throughout the Horus Heresy books, where he's like still set apart even from the traitors, right? Mocking the ones that enslave themselves to chaos. He sees himself as something different. But then ultimately he too chooses the path of Demon Prince, which kind of always felt out of character for him. I think it would have been cool if they kept him as kind of a atheistic force that kind of fought all sides and was like truly chaos in the sense of fighting chaos as much as they fight the Imperium.
I guess you could maybe, I mean, it could be plot armor, but you could maybe like figure out a way where he more turned to demonhood out of necessity rather than out of he wanted to do it. He was like forced to do it somehow,
Yeah, that's more of a tragic ending then for him, I would say. I should say
true.
More than atheists, because it's hard to be an atheist when you kind of know that gods exist in 40k, but he's more anti-theist. He knows that gods exist and still would resist
right
them.
Yeah,
which I think would be a very cool and unique take, but they didn't go that way apparently. So.
I think that's a really good point. It's like he's driven by, like throughout this whole thing, like show, we've been talking about that he's driven by vengeance, not for love for chaos, or and then all of a sudden he is actually a demon now, and he has embraced it fully. So I think your point about making it the necessity, I think, is really true.
Yeah, Peter in the chat says Perturabo should have never been a prince. Made no sense, even with all he went through. So yeah, people kind of getting that same vibe where he was never supposed to really be a chaos guy.
Doesn't seem that way. But
like I said, it was controversial more before the Horus Heresy books were all fleshed out. Like I remember when it was discovered that Perturabo, or was revealed that Perturabo was a demon prince, and a lot of the community was split on that fact when that was revealed. So just I still kind of feel that way. I think he would have been a very cool third approach, right?
It even just like the way he became a demon prince, like he's not a demon prince of Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, or Chinch. He's kind of undivided. He's just a demon prince of the warp, essentially, which raises some more questions like, so where are you getting your power from? You're just getting it from random warp stuff? Are you a master of just random warp stuff? Are you taking like the Abaddon approach where you're getting like a tiny little piece of power from every god? But like that doesn't seem like what Perturabo would do.
It just makes him even more antithetical. I had another thought there too, Mark, when you were talking. It's gone now. All good.
Go around the table, closing thoughts from everyone around. Let's start with Gothic Garnish. Any closing thoughts on Perturabo?
I think he's an interesting character, and I think he's consistently underestimated. And I think he's a massive threat in the in the current galaxy.
Underestimated and massive threat. Yeah, for sure. That's great. Christian, any deep-seated insight?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything more than stuff I've already said. I think he deserves more attention from like the material that's produced about him. But I'm also not a huge fan of the direction it has gone in either. So we'll see. We'll see. Like you said, probably when they do end up releasing his model, they will eventually here. Like we know that pretty much is going to happen. So depending what they do with them, they could take them in a very interesting, unique direction, or they might not. We'll just hold my breath and wait.
Yeah.
I do like his Greek theme, though. I like everything Greek.
Cool. Any thoughts, Jordan?
I guess you could maybe, I mean, it could be plot armor, but you could maybe like figure out a way where he more turned to demonhood out of necessity rather than out of he wanted to do it. He was like forced to do it somehow, you know.
How dare you? What? You don't like the hazard stripes, Jordan?
Yeah.
Are you not afraid?
Yeah.
Better. They need a better designer.
Hard disagree with Jordan, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I love. Bland, man.
Yeah, it's like eating just rice, man. It's fucking delicious. You don't even need anything else. It's cool. Well, that's an episode. We still have 2 more episodes to come about the Iron Warriors. We got the 30K era, and then we'll do the 40K era. So this Perturabo train hasn't hit the brakes yet. If you got inspired to buy some minis, though, go check out Merlin Miniatures. Use promo code Lorehammer or use the link in the description below to get there. Buy yourself some minis, treat yourself, and treat me in return. Go check out Merlin Miniatures. I also do another podcast called Lorehammer Listener Lore Podcast. We do homebrew lore where we read that out, share the stories that you guys have created. And go check that out, Lorehammer Listener Lore.
And if you like Star Wars, come listen to me and Jordan chat about it on our Star Lores podcast. That's Lores like Lorehammer. Regretting the name choice now, but it is what it is. Just come listen to us chat about Star Wars.
Awesome. And if you like Warhammer 40K lore, and if you like to see things brought to life in a digital way, then follow the Gothic Garnish at Gothic Garnish on TikTok and Instagram as well.
Yeah, very cool. James, thank you so much for joining us. It was a lot of fun. You sacrificed sleep for us, which was incredible.
It's the least I can do. It's the least I can do. I might ascend to a demonhood.
Nice. Sleep well, sweet dreams. Dream of the Eye of Terra. Yeah. Cool. All right. One Patreon shout out this time. Evan, thank you so much. You guys can go join the Patreon. You can watch videos, all that kind of stuff, fun stuff. But we'll close it out here. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Adios.